What patterns separate companies that consistently win versus those that struggle?
Clarity and alignment to that clarity, or not really much gets accomplished.
Hi, everybody. Today's guest is Kevin Stealey, CEO of RTR Technovation Corporation. Kevin has built his career accelerating profitable growth by sharpening brand positioning. Kevin is also the author of Winning Bets, Leadership Lessons from a Father's Football Pool.
Really appreciate being here.
Looking forward to our conversation. So, you've worked across consumer packaged goods and life sciences. Looking back, what patterns separate companies that consistently win versus those that struggle?
I think clarity and alignment. I think that is probably if I had to answer that in one idea, it's the clarity of where we're going to play and how we're going to win, and having full alignment in the organization so that everybody can run against it in all the same direction. And I think a lot of people will have clarity, but they don't have alignment, or they don't really have clarity, but there's kind of lots of alignment to too many different places or too many different directions. And I see this at the total company level, at the highest strategic level of companies. I see this at, division levels. I see this at functional levels. I see this at small team level, small working teams creating an initiative, or a small sales team. You can see it, at every element, clarity and alignment to that clarity, or not really much gets accomplished.
How do you fix it? Because I see the lack of clarity or even alignment at certain levels. What in your experience has worked to fix those type of issues?
Yeah, it's Keith, it's interesting. There's a lot, there can be some different drivers. And depending on the different drivers, you kind of have to solve the problem that you have. Okay. What I find a lot is, if we think about some of the highest levels at the company level, you got to be able to articulate something pretty clear and pretty easily. Right. And that means it's a simple idea, but can actually maybe be a little too broad. And if you don't put those guardrails in for the people operating, leading, and executing the business, you can find that there's a lot of scope creep that happens,
Yeah.
right? Through one simple phrase. And it may not be what the executive team or the leadership team or the directors might have desired. They thought about it maybe very clearly and would be easily making those trade-offs and knowing what was in scope and what was out of scope. But oftentimes, to communicate well, we've got to simplify, but you have to simplify and make sure you define enough such that you get the right guardrails in place. You don't want to cripple the organization. You don't want to tell them, here's the only things that work and here are the only things you want to go do, because you need the ability of the organization to find some solutions, because we don't know them all until we start working, until we start taking a few steps forward. And the people on the front line are more apt, if they truly understand the idea and the guardrails to a strategy, they're actually quite capable of figuring out where they should push it and where they should innovate a little to get a little bit more success. And the next thing you know, that little bit of more success becomes the next big idea for the entire organization.
Yeah, and I guess in a way that's the true definition of empowerment. Create a strategy, you have an ideal of where people are going. In the military, we used to call it the commander's intent.
Yeah.
From that
Yeah.
perspective.
Yes.
But yeah, one of the things that if you could talk a little bit more about, I know beforehand we had a discussion from a marketing perspective and the simplification and how sometimes that the difference between packaged goods and pharma, we got into that whole discussion about the VisAid and all of the number of screens and things and just simplifying the message. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. I think as you had rightfully, I think, introduced, I started in packaged goods, Procter and Gamble, really simplicity and clarity in learning how to take a concept of a product and turn it into a 30-second advertisement. And that is the torture test of, do I have one core simple idea that I can execute and execute really well, right? Because if not, they're not going to remember it. And we've seen thousands and thousands of commercials that are not very memorable. And it's because we're trying to put a lot of different ideas within there. So that was my training ground. And when I came to, the tech sector and a lot of life sciences, what I found was we had highly complicated products that rightfully so had a lot of features, benefits, technology, reasons to believe that that was a really great product. We had data that was coming out of our ears, and we tended to just put it all in. We'd load it all up. And I would remember going to my first, call it sales training, right? We were training the sales organization. And again, it was somewhere around slide 52 where I eventually just said, okay, I'm lost. I'm not a biologist. I am so lost. I can only imagine how some of these salespeople actually feel right now. We've lost the forest for the trees, and we're just giving them data because we have data. We're not giving them the right story supported by the data that matters most. And I think that type of dialogue needs to make sure gets vetted before we start launching out into an army of 300, 1,000 salespeople, 3,000 salespeople. That's really critical.
Yeah, it's harder than ever now because there's two sides of that. You have specialty where you have smaller sales forces, but even larger sales forces where you have to get this message out. And there's more data than ever. I mean, we can slice the data in so many different ways that ultimately what the message should be can get lost in conversation.
Yeah, it's really true. Keith, one thing that I have learned that has been a very interesting learning for me in my career as I've had a great career, long career. I learn as I go. I deal with people at all different levels of success from, the entry level employee that I might be training, and I've dealt with CEOs and boards. And what I found was the higher I went and the higher the discussion was, the simpler it became and the less paper that was involved. And so we live in a world where it becomes very easy to create content. It's very easy to create that 52-page PowerPoint deck. Okay? I mean, we have become so proficient at creating paper upon paper upon paper that becomes a detriment to our ability to communicate with absolute clarity. And when you get into very important conversations, they're simple, they're clear. Sometimes you're sitting on a couch with nothing else, right? And that I think is an important thing, especially for maybe younger people in the organization to understand, especially to think about a young salesperson. We give them 52 pages of PowerPoint decks. We keep coming back to this
Right.
proverbial 52 pages, but we give them a bunch of sales aids. We give them a bunch of data. We give them a bunch of things, but they have to go connect and create a connection with that customer. And they've got to be able to tell them a simple story that gets them to believe that, yeah, I need that. I
Yeah.
need to do that. And we just forget that sometimes because we're inundating it because it becomes too easy to create. The hard work is figuring out what matters most. The hard work is always taking complexity from a complex portfolio or
Yes.
a complex data set and creating it simple. That's the really hard work. That's the work that I wish the life science industry, the pharmaceutical industry, and many others would work harder at. At
Yeah.
times, we're really good, but a lot of times, I would say the average is we're just not that good at doing that. And we've got a lot of range to go. And I noticed when we did that, we could make a sales force 20% more productive just by the information we gave them.
Yeah, communication is such an art form. There's that thought process that for writers that it's easier to write a book than it is a short story. You got to get to the point. You got to make it very simple. Get from point A to point B very quickly that it makes sense to people. Same concept in a way.
Now is an important point for me to point out that that book that you got that I wrote is a
Yeah.
short book. Just joking, just joking. But yes, it is a short book.
While we're on that, talk to me a little bit about the kind of thought process behind it and some of the leadership lessons and just, the I loved it for two reasons. You talked about creating some family traditions and we did something similar, different. We have a cookie contest every year that we've been doing since the children were young, and now that they're out of the house, we're trying to figure out how do we manage that when people are a lot of different locations. Similar, your children are a little younger than mine, but started out as this kind of pool, and as they gotten older, a way to connect. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So First, I'm a huge sports fan, right? A huge sports fan, grew up playing sports, been competitive all my life. I tend to bring that out in business today, but still try to stay active and fit as I can. But huge sports fan. My whole family is, and we had moved across the country from the Midwest out to California, which we live today. And we were moving away from family. And when you do that, you end up with a lot of extra time. You don't have a cousin's birthday party to go to this weekend and, a shower the next weekend. You just all of a sudden it becomes this vacuum of time and there was the four of us in our family. And so I was looking to try to figure out how do we fill that time in a very meaningful way because we are our actions. We all will have different perceptions, we'll all have different thoughts in the world, but we are the actions that we take in the world with people. We're the physical connections that we make. And so as we were, getting busy with sports for my kids, my daughter and son, and running off to soccer matches in different states and going in different directions, we needed something that we could be connected as much as we could on those Saturdays because they're precious. So I took our love for college football and created a college football pool, and we ran it for years. And probably around my ninth or 10th year, I started to text out the pick sheet, each weekly pick sheet. And within it, I would give just guidance I was writing to my kids. It was a love letter to my two children who were teenagers and just about to be teenagers at the time and just kind of growing up through life. And I was trying to do everything I could to simply communicate in story fashion some good, important thoughts and values that they could take with them for the rest of their life. And so each chapter is a different week of the college football pool and what I saw amazing coaches do, players do, and how that they could think about that or how I could dimensionalize that in the way of leadership principles that are good for college football and they're good for my kids playing soccer, but they're good for when they enter the workforce, when they go out to college, when they live life. And just a couple of them: believe in yourself, play with great passion and enthusiasm, learn to get better every day, be you, do you. And at the end of the day, you're eventually going to be asked to bet on yourself. And don't be afraid to do it. Figure out a way to just go ahead and bet on yourself and move forward. So those are just a couple of them that come out of, what was like a 13, 14 week kind of season and
Yeah.
some championships. And
Yeah.
we had some family connection as well. So it ended up being a miracle type season. No plan to write the book, but at the end of the day, when I look back at the texts I sent them, I thought I'd sure love a way to capture all this together and let them have a keepsake. And as I was doing it, the best way I thought I could do it was model my own beliefs, and that was get better every day. So I learned how to do some self publishing and launch a book.
It was pretty cool because the part that I did read, there was a whole backdrop of the Connor Stallion thing, University of Michigan. So there was that whole, opportunity for leadership lessons, Sharon Moore stepping in and,
Yeah.
doing some things with the team and everything. So that was pretty good. It was very insightful.
Yeah, it was a funny year because we happen to have some family connection back to University of Michigan with my wife and her dad, and so they went on to win the national championship. But there was a lot of drama along the way, and it was a great also way for me to highlight that anytime you're going to something great, anytime you're going to do something that you really want to achieve, you're going to hit challenges and you're going to hit setbacks. And the unwritten story in this that only probably my son and daughter and my wife really, really know is we were all facing our own setbacks as we went through that.
Mm.
So, we were having injuries. We were having, challenges with recruiting. We were having rejections come. My wife and I were both having our own challenges, separately. And so I was speaking again, a love letter to my kids to say, yeah, this is life. Let's love life. Let's be grateful for it. It isn't all rosy, and it's not the point for it to be all rosy. The point is for you to learn how to navigate through it and just keep going and find your way to success.
Sounds like some very great lessons. I'm gonna switch gears here for a little bit. So you've been on the packaged goods side. You spent some time with Thermo Fisher, and now you're out on your own. Talk a little bit about some of the differences and some of the things that have been very similar in how you operate.
Well, I think, you know, it's a good question coming off of the book where there was a lot of like personal, like compass things that I was really communicating. And that is the, you have to constantly be understanding what you believe in and what's true to you as a person and what is true to your leadership thoughts and kind of principles that you want to operate against. And then constantly be kind of updating that and making sure that you're acting against it, even in tough times. And I think that's been definitely the one constant that the more you can quote unquote be you,
Mhm.
right? Define who you are and be who you are, the better you're going to be able to lead in any environment. Whether that's a large $83 billion Procter and Gamble, we grew from, like 17 billion to 40 billion at Thermo Fisher during my tenure. And now we're, preclinical, no revenue type stuff, only a handful of people kind of going at it. So wildly different situations,
Mhm.
but the core leadership philosophies really do apply within that. So I think that's first from in terms of what's similar. I do think that there is a massive difference that speaks back to maybe the communication part, but complexity in communication. The larger you get, okay, the more complex you get, the more touches, the more handoffs, the more that a clear idea has the ability to actually become a complicated, misunderstood idea. And that becomes challenge in very large organizations that you don't tend to have in small, nimble organizations where many people are wearing multiple hats and
Mhm.
doing kind of the same job, right? Large company, we've got the marketing team, we've got the sales, folks. We've got a training team. We've got a sales ops, support team. Okay. And there are moments when all of that comes together with beautiful alignment and it crushes it. And then there are moments where everybody's standing around pointing fingers, looking at each other. Okay. And the only thing they have to and then the answer is, "Well, how'd this happen?" "Well, I don't know, I trained them." "Well, I don't know, we sent them the deck, it's here, it's in page 17." "Oh, well, I'm not getting it." "Well, did you open up all the sales aids?" "No, well, no, I don't have time." So, yeah, like, I think the more you grow, you just have more opportunities for misalignment, lack of clarity, and that whole notion that I started with, clarity, alignment starts to break down
Mhm.
by nobody's individual fault or intention. It's just small rounding errors.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting because if you think about it, part of it is the math equation. If you think in terms of if you have a team of two, you add one person, you ask the question, well, how many relationships have you added to the team? You've literally doubled the amount of relationships that are on that team. And so when you think of it from that perspective, then you begin to realize, gee, even with a small team, it's easy to have misalignment, lack of clarity. And then I think it's Dunbar that talks about the rule of 200. Once a company gets beyond that, no longer is it just the founder that can kind of push out because it's the number of relationships that one individual person can have. I think it's between 150 and 200 people. So once you get beyond that, it becomes so important for the leadership team to be very aligned and be very clear on what the message is and what the communication is going to be. So a lot of companies, even when they hit that number, they begin to have problems when they look at culture, they look at things like change and those type of things, that there are a lot of challenges within that bucket. And some of it is just because it's just the simple logistics of the number of people. And ultimately, no matter how much AI, how much technology, we are still driven by relationships. And that's the crux of what makes us special as humans.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. And it's why when you think about it in any larger organization, you end up getting promoted for different reasons than what you need to do when you get there. When you are leading a large group, some of the most important things are inspiration, communication, rechecking the communication, re-inspiring when things are tough, right? Recommunicating the vision and why it's important and why it will be wonderful when we actually get through all of these headaches, right? That's the skill once it gets to a certain level. But in order to get to that level, there's a lot more doing. Right? There's a lot more doing. And so you get promoted for a totally different reason in a large corporation than what they need when you really get there. And some people just, that's a natural thing. Some people learn to it and some people never get it. And it just cuts that way. It just is what it is.
Yeah, makes perfect sense. I mean, especially if you're still operating at the level that you were before and it takes a totally different skill set. It's like going from being a sales rep to a manager. You start over again. I mean, it's this, you can afford to be a prima donna as a sales representative. It's all about you. But when you're a manager, you have a team of people you have to take care of.
So true.
Tell us a little bit about the technology that you're working on now. I read the line. I'm not sure I understood any of it at all.
Oh, no, no problem. Nanoparticle technology. Okay, so very small technology will be a carrying vehicle. And what we can do is based on its unique shape that's produced by this thing called DNA origami, we're able to actually go in through the bloodstream and find inflammation and bind to inflammation. And on the other end, we'll carry a therapeutic molecule for treatment. And so that enables us to get directly to the site of inflammation, i.e., the tumor, where there's inflammation around the tumor, and allows release of the drug directly to the source. We're very focused at the moment around different targets in oncology because nobody questions that chemotherapy is very good and effective at
Hmm.
destroying tumors and killing tumors, but it's what it kills in its wake getting there. And if we can direct it in more smaller quantities directly to the source, we have the ability to step change potentially the efficacy, but real importantly, improve the safety profile of it as well. Exciting opportunity, which comes with a lot of challenges of the complex biology of
Okay.
humans. It is not linear. We're a very small company, so we use AI a lot in almost everything I do.
Mm.
Okay. We use AI to do a lot of our research and help us, be efficient there. We use the AI to do all of our simple administrative stuff. And we use AI to help us think about what are our next experiments and things like that. And one of the interesting thing is it's not linear and AI is a little bit more linear,
Mm. Okay.
right?
Okay.
It's
Yeah.
predicting, that
Right.
kind of that straight line.
Yeah.
And, the human body is not a straight line. What we don't know actually is not a straight line. It actually is a complex curve. And so, we're using AI to the absolute maximum given we're a very small team, but we certainly have our challenges because it can only predict so much. And
Yeah.
it'll give
Right.
us it's very confident in its answers to us.
Yeah.
And sometimes it doesn't even take, 3 minutes and we've already decided, yeah,
That's not a
that
good answer.
it's just not, it doesn't work. Sometimes it takes a phone call to a few of the experts, and they're like, oh yeah, we tried that. That failed, but not in the record anywhere, Keith,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
So if you think about the publicly available databases within biology, it's all published papers,
Okay.
it's FDA review data,
Hmm.
okay? It's nothing but success,
Mm.
okay? And so AI might say, "Oh, I can extrapolate or interpolate. This should work."
Mm.
And then we'll go off and try to investigate that. And a few times we ran some experiments that didn't work. And then a few times we called up experts and dialogued and they said, yeah, I ran that. I ran that back in 2004. And here's the problem we had. And it's like, oh, and it's just sitting in some
Okay.
PI's head because they
Hmm.
ran that and then they had to move on to the next big thing. So it's been an interesting journey with the wake of AI. And can we apply AI and can we do that? And can companies be, 4 and 5 people and have the impact of, 100 or 400? So yeah, it's a real lesson.
So I guess two questions from that. The first question would be, now are you able to educate the AI and upload any of that information or failed many experiments that you have internally, or are you able to pull any of that information to say, hey, somebody has tried that, here were the results, so it kind of goes in a different direction? How does that work?
Well, we can definitely do the former, and we are. doing some of that, where we're informing the AI with our results and trying to do that. We're small and limited in terms of the data that we've been able to generate to date. So we only have so much that it can kind of teach an AI model or help train. But we do try to do that. And then the thing that is the harder part, and it has me really scratching my head for the whole industry, is there isn't a lot. If you're a big pharma, you may be best positioned to have a proprietary database of lots of some successes, but hopefully
Mm,
lots of failures too,
okay.
right? And I do think that if they can pipe that in and start using that in their own proprietary database with their kind of own AI, if you will, or own version of AI, they can probably improve the productivity of an AI engine
Mm,
to help them kind of move science along a little bit. So I don't think it's totally, impossible to do it, but a lot of people, we don't have the full data sets. Again, the only thing that gets published are the last few experiments that actually were successful. The only thing that gets submitted to the FDA were the last few experiments that actually were successful.
right.
It's
Okay.
like, right, there's so little of what we've actually done. Now, this is a hypothesis of me, but I think we've probably done a lot more in biology in all these little labs across the universities across the world. And we, as a universe, probably would know more today if we found a way to celebrate some failures a little bit
Mm,
better in the industry. But the failures don't work in an environment where publish or perish. You must, publish something or not. Nobody wants to hear about you almost made it or you didn't make, or it didn't work. And so I think there's a lot of just lost effort that that's just lost.
yeah.
It's in people's minds, it's in people's computers. There was one day I was talking to somebody that is just totally outside of the universe of this work, and she was like, "Was there any place you could pull that stuff together?" And I thought, "Yeah, I mean, that would be an interesting project." So there are days I do think about that and try to figure out, maybe we could, but that's a tough struggle, I think, for the industry at the moment. We're not internalizing 100% of the work that we put in.
That makes sense. I was at a conference a couple of years ago. I feel like the guy was working on Castleman's disease or something like that, but he had a database of all of the products that were out there, and it was more about, the rings, the carbon, and all of that stuff, the makeup of them. And then he was using AI to sort based on the probability that similarities in products worked in certain ways. So what they're trying to do is a match for certain diseases to figure out if they could cure diseases. So in a sense, it's a similar type of thing, but it's more about taking all the data of failures and things that haven't worked. Because, like, imagine how many drugs have almost come to market. That there's a lot of data out there that would support things that are available, and because the truth to be told, that there are drugs that are approved now that have been approved that if they went back to the FDA probably would not be approved, and so all
Yeah.
of that data gets to be very rich to figure out which direction is the best direction to go to.
It's very true. I mean, and what I would say where there is, it sounds like maybe some organic chemistry work he was kind of predicting on based on the shapes of the carbons and all that. I do think that AI is much better in chemistry than it is in biology, right? So can it interpolate or extrapolate based on the laws of chemistry how, a molecule will work, a chemical molecule will work? I think actually that's where AI is really shining right now. I think I've even read I know I've read some stuff where they're finding how elements, can work, almost maybe new elements in the periodic table or new ways to work with elements within the periodic table that we didn't know before, but with the new compute power, that's a much more linear way, predictive model or kind of laws of chemistry, if you will, laws of chemistry and laws of physics. Now, when you get that chemical, that organic chemical molecule, and you put it in the human body, is it the right size? Will it get captured by the kidney or the liver or not? That's when it starts to be a lot more challenging because biology by nature is probably a little bit less linear and a little bit less predictable with what we know today. We're getting better, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Makes sense. So, Kevin, a question that comes to mind. So, you've been on the large side of life sciences or just in large organizations in general. You're running a startup. I know that, at least from my perspective, having spent many years in life sciences, a lot of people kind of follow that trajectory where they start out large. You have a lot more specialty companies now, companies are downsizing. And so people are either consulting or, in some cases, they go out and they start their own thing. If you were giving advice to a founder based on some of the lessons that you learned over the years, what are one or two things that you would tell them to watch out for, or some things that would help them be successful faster?
Yeah, I mean, I think, one, know who you are so you can be you and know what those skills are that you bring to the table and make sure that you're trying to play really to those, right? That's, I think, really important. You're starting anything from scratch. You have to go in eyes wide open to here's what's critically important that will make this successful. Here's what I have, and here's what I need to build as a human being to match that requirements of being successful. And then you can do a much more thoughtful approach to how do I want to tackle that? Because there are some people that say, okay, I'm not going to change. I'm going to be who I am, and I'm just going to go apply that and find the people who need what I am. And if that's the case, then I think you'll want to navigate to really starting up, founding, whatever, things that really fit what you are so that you can just go do what you are. Now, of course, you're going to have to grow to make that successful. And we all have to do that. Expansion is the natural path of all human beings, but it's not as dramatic of I'm missing the five most important skills to stand up a whole new company, right? With multiple employees and this complexity, and I've never done anything close to that, right? I've been sitting in supporting people doing things for quite some time, and now all of a sudden I'd have to be the person who generates, creates, leads, directs, everything in between. You just have to know that that's what you gotta build,
Yeah.
or you gotta go get a partner to build upon that, or you gotta right? So you kinda have to go do those things and really be clear about that audit. I think that's most important because the last thing you wanna do is be in a situation where you need to grow in ways that you're just not going to. It's just not how you wanna grow, it's not where you wanna grow, it's not what you wanna do. It's fine, like, the universe is going to force you to grow, so fine. Go grow in an area where you wanna go grow, if simple as that.
Yeah. I have a mantra, know thyself, you know?
99% of life comes back to that mantra, my friend.
Hmm.
So it's a good, important mantra to keep front and center.
Yeah. Go into business for yourself. You'll find out how much stuff you don't know.
Yeah.
Well, Kevin,
Which is most things.
right, exactly. Like the more I stay in business, the more I realize, I don't know that either.
Yeah, it
You
really
know,
is. It's that and leadership, right? I mean, you
right,
don't
exactly.
even have to be in business. You could be working for somebody else, but you get to the right level of leadership for yourself. All of a sudden you realize, I don't know anything.
Yeah. You give help people or, and you start working with and it's interesting because when you're in a corporate structure, I don't know, it's a different dance than when you're on your own. So even when you have other consultants, VAs, or other people, there are things you assume that you do well, i.e., give direction, and the person looks at you like a deer in headlights and just like, I thought I communicated more effectively than that. And
Hmm.
it's clearly
Yeah.
not because in some cases, the people you're working with, they don't have enough insight or context to understand what it is that you do, and we're expecting people to automatically fill in those gaps, and that becomes, I found that becomes very front and center being out on your own relatively to in corporate. Everybody's speaking to some degree the same language, and I think it gets back to this earlier conversation we had around clarity or alignment. We also get in trouble because we assume people fill in a gap, but what they fill in a gap with may be incorrect information, and so that's the
Yeah.
challenge there. So it plays on both sides.
I think that's so important. I have a lot of empathy for that. I think that's you're driving your consulting business, and you know, I have empathy for the fact that you get about 1% of the leader's total time, yet you're supposed to operate in perfect unison and understand what they want and be able to deliver. You get so little time for you to do the assessment yourself. You actually end up having to use what they communicate. And more times than not, we're just not communicating well. One of the greatest skills that I got at P&G was how to communicate, and specifically how to communicate on paper. And we were all trained on this course called Leadership on Paper. It was one of the most important and best leadership, I think, less classes I ever took. And it manifested its way in two ways for me coming in a marketing general management career path. The first was writing a monthly letter on the business, 1 page or a 1 page memo about a recommendation. We didn't use PowerPoint back in the day. I don't know what they're doing now. And we didn't do multiple page recommendations. We did 1 page. Okay. It really forced clarity in what do you want to get accomplished? What do you need to, communicate to them, and how do you do it? And then the second thing, and the second torture test was even worse than that. And that was when we were doing television advertising. We'd write a creative brief that was essentially 2 items.
Mm.
And that was, here's the benefit. 3, here's the objective. Here's the benefit. Here's the reason to believe. So not much more than 4 sentences got handed to the advertising agency to go create world-class advertising.
Mm.
And here
Okay.
they are getting 1% of our time. Even when we spend a lot of time with an external consultant, or even somebody, not a consultant, somebody working on the business, they really get about 1% of our total time. So the ability to communicate is absolutely critical. And I have a lot of empathy for people who are trying to receive that in very small doses and then trying to create world-class work for an organization. It's very challenging to do. And so I admire you for the work that you do and the success that you have. And I just, wish you the best in doing that,
Well, thank
because
you.
I
Really
understand the
appreciate it.
challenge.
Yeah, it's exciting. It is a communication piece because you do realize how much time you don't get, or what's said or what's not said. It's reading in between the lines, and then you get all of the information from other people, and so people want X, but what they need is Y, because you're pulling all that stuff together. And sometimes, you see people going down the road that's not the right way, and they'll make decisions to go in a different direction, and you're just like, "Oh, I've seen this before. What you need is really X, because you think it's going to be this new technology, is going to be all of this stuff, but your problem is this here. You're not even aligned on this. And you're going to create more problems by doing it this way because you still fundamentally have this problem. Now you've added 6 things on top of that original problem."
Yeah. It's like reading people at a poker table,
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a definite skill set to have. And kudos to you and others that do it and do it well. I'm continuing trying to learn it.
Well, we all are. I said, we're all in the same boat. I do appreciate you hopping on and enjoyed our conversation. And where can we find you, Kevin?
Yeah, well, first of all, probably my 2 socials are LinkedIn, Kevin Stealey, and Instagram, which is Kevin Stealey as well, Stealey. You can find my book, Winning Bets, if you want a small little thing from Amazon. It's on there, Amazon.com. Leadership Lessons from a Father's College Football Pool. Yeah, reach out if I can help anybody and be of any assistance to anyone.
Kevin, thanks again. Any last words for the audience?
I think based on our conversation, I would just say you're never done simplifying. You're never done. You're never done. Constantly be finding ways to make it simpler and easier to execute. And I think when you do that and take that approach, you'll have an approach of constantly being better and improving and getting better every day. And it will help you actually take the actions, the organization take the actions to get better and improve and get the results that you want.
Well, great. Thank you so much, Kevin. Really appreciate you being on.
Keith, your pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.